How can you nurture a non-FF culture when you make snowballing so easy? This new patch coming out, you're making it so much harder for a team that's behind to catch up. With the feats of strength, for example.
I agree. Yeah, feats of strength. I think feats of strength should be like have some sort of recoverability for the losing team that they can like activate like feats themselves, or they just pay a little bit of extra to get them in or something like that. Or like they have like some sort of more difficult objective to attain after they lost it. But to be fair, people have been saying this to me like, oh, FF culture next patch, the game is just going to be over all the time because of feats of strength. But you also got to remember that they're adding like tower resurrection. Your towers can respawn, by the way. There will be plenty of opportunities to make comebacks in the next meta, and obviously like we'll see, like we still gotta see. It's very difficult to work in a chaotic environment because you have no idea exactly what the outcome is going to be.
Example, if that is the case, if it is not worth catching up, we'd probably need to make adjustments.
This is good, keeping the finger on the pulse.
But I'll say something about forfeiting that I think is important.
I like that.
Something you want to avoid is the concept. It's a concept we call trapped games. What a trapped game is, is a game where you have lost the game, but the game has not ended. And when I say lost the game, I don't mean you're at a disadvantage. I don't mean, oh, they're ahead 1,000 gold.
This is such a dangerous concept.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a game where it's like, it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that you will ever come back. And at that point, it generally is better for the game to end. It's not great to be in a trapped game. And so to modulate trapped games, you need to either give players tools to end the game, one of those tools being forfeiting, or you need to make it easier to come back. But of course, there's only a certain amount of comeback that the game can have before leads don't matter, right? So it's a fine balance between leads matter and getting ahead.
Wait. I agree with this. Like you really gotta strike the balance, because if you give too many comeback opportunities, like you'll have moments where like you get a bounty when enemies aren't even that far ahead, and you like get a bounty on a hyper scaling late game champion. It's like all of a sudden you're winning even though you don't deserve it. I agree with this. I agree. And I think right now you have just enough tools to close out the games you play correctly, and you have just enough tools to make a comeback. I think the game is remarkably well balanced in terms of making a comeback. Granted, the situation right now is much, much better in terms of surrender culture compared to when I made a video a couple months back. Because when I made the video, there was a radically different situation where people were over surrendering like absolutely crazy, and they were just the worst players to play with. 100%. There's still a lot of that lingering. There's a lot of problems with that, but it's a lot better. And I'm not saying it's because of my video, by the way, like just so people don't think. I'm not saying it's because of my video. It's just because community's catching up slowly. Because like a natural fucking process where community catches up. I made a video because I noticed the desync between community and the real life, because they like a lot of them kept playing like the earlier hyper aggressive hyper snowball game, and they didn't realize that the game shifted to the game where you actually have plenty of opportunities to come back, and it's very well balanced. They didn't notice. Obviously in like half a year they will notice a little bit more, and people are going to surrender less. And that's why I made a video, and that's why I got good responses, because people resonated with the idea so damn well, because it's true. It just makes sense.
It matters versus you have a reasonable feeling that, you know, if you do something you could potentially come back. This is why things like gold kill bounties are good for the game, right? Where it's like, hey, that guy's really far ahead, we're probably going to lose, but hey, if we kill him, we'll get some gold back, and, you know, maybe we have a chance.
Shutdowns, objective bounties,
so
everything.
Trapped games is something we think about a lot, and that's probably one of the things the team is going to be looking at, you know, with the upcoming changes to, like, the game and snowballing and stuff. Is like,
ooh, that, you know, like, okay, trap games in general are a very, very dangerous concept. They're an extremely dangerous concept. Secondly, the way he's speaking here about, like, we're going to be looking into the potentially, like, in the trap games concept in the future with the feats of strength. Like, let's say feats of strength become, like, very snowbally, and you have, like, 90% win rate if you win. Feats of strength happen early, 10 to 14 minutes. So if you notice you're losing too many feats of strength, people start giving up at 10 minutes. And Riot Games, in all its wisdom, they give him 4-1 surrender on 10-minute mark. That will break the game.
It's all a balance.
I agree.
That said, though, I know there's a number of people who don't like forfeiting. There's a number of people and streamers who will say, like, forfeiting is bad, Riot shouldn't let you forfeit, this is a competitive game.
Okay. Yo, who the fuck is strawmanning me over here? That's not my position. Like, did I watch my video? God damn it. In an ideal world, if we're talking about it, forfeiting in rank should not be a fucking thing in a complex game like League of Legends. And people are like, oh, but in chess, like, it's very customary that if you're behind -9 points and you don't have a queen, that you should surrender. Like, shut the fuck up. League's not chess, first of all. Second of all, it's not exact science, because it's not a solved game, because you have 9 unknown variables, like, in forms of other humans, and you don't relatively lose value in chess by playing longer. You can play chess forever with the lead, just dancing, and you're still in the fucking lead. League of Legends doesn't work like that because you have relative scale of gold. The longer the game goes, the relatively less valuable the gold is, and the levels cap out at some point. There's so many differences there. So yeah, all the chess morons, you know. Anyway, let's talk about the trap games. Trap games. So as a company, you kind of have to think about this concept and look at it because you're looking for player satisfaction at the first place. Couple of problems. First of all, Riot Games doesn't see how they made this forfeit culture. They created the forfeit culture by pushing back the surrender vote. Back in the day, you could only surrender like at 15 minutes if it's 5-0, which makes a lot more sense. Making it 4-1 at 15 minutes when the game hasn't even pretty much begun, it's so bad. It really becomes this sort of like you're feeding in the narrative of forfeiting. And by Riot Games also stating on multiple different accounts that players are really good at knowing when to surrender, it's also like creating this full sense of knowledge. And trust me, like when I play these games, I see players who don't know shit. They don't understand the game at all. I can't rectify this that they're fairly generally correct in assuming that it's lost. On the other hand, when I see players play, they have no idea. They have no goddamn clue when the game is over. They have no idea. Like if Riot Games doesn't trust me, they can literally watch my stream and every day we make one comeback where like 3 or 4 of my teammates wanted to surrender. Every single day one happens. It's not even rare. This is that players are like in such game knowledge dissonance that they have no idea. They're desynced with the reality entirely.
When you queue up for a competitive game, you should expect to finish it, things like that, right? I get where you're coming from there. The thing you have to modulate that against, though, is like players being in games that are like likely to be miserable experiences for them. And so I generally
this is also the problem of the trap game idea. Players are being trapped in a game that they're miserable in. Why are you miserable in a game? You're creating this dopamine hunting. I mean, maybe that's what Riot Games wanted in the first place, to create more like a in and out mobile game sort of fucking feel to it. I don't think you should really factor that in that much, because if you do, it's a very, very dangerous slippery slope that you gotta keep giving more and more. Like you as a designer, you create the barrier where the game is likely to be surrendered or end. So you create the barrier. Based on your barrier, like people feed and they push it back. Okay, if you put it at 20 minutes, usually people are like 20 minutes they would be tilted and it's like, man, this game is so lost. It's over. It's over. Time to FF. Fuck this shit. Let me leave. Right? You push it back to 15, 14, 59. Man, this game is over. Fuck this shit. Fuck this shit. You know, earlier you put the barrier, the more you're feeding the toxic personality of people who are so clueless about the game that they like decide to terminate the games on their own for their own teammates. That's becoming self-fulfilling prophecy and completely taking the data on the game's surrender accuracy. I want to see if he says anything about that.
Allowing teams to forfeit is a good thing, and I think 4 of the 5 votes being enough for it is correct.
I agree, but we disagree on the mark. I don't think it should be on 15. It's not even close on 15. You just created tank meta essentially recently, and you want games to be surrendered at 15-4-1. That makes no sense. But yeah,
I think it would be incorrect if it was like 3-2, but 4 to 5 I think is good. And the reason I think it's good is because you don't want players like trapped in games that are like likely to be miserable and feel pointless. But then I'm combine that with this.
I think you're feeding the people's misery, though, by making them just crave that, like, in and out early game sort of feel. I think players should play the game for what it is and learn to appreciate and enjoy the comebacks. Some of the greatest experiences for me in the game aren't winning 15 LP, aren't winning 20 LP, aren't winning a game in 5 minutes or losing a game in 5 minutes. They're not my favorite experiences in the game. My favorite experiences in the game are popping off and making a comeback when it seemed impossible.
Their statement is like, we looked into the data, players forfeiting, and we found that players generally are pretty knowledgeable about when they're going to lose the game if there's like a majority forfeit. Okay. So I'm not talking about like...
Okay, this is another dangerous statement which I do not trust at all. First of all, let me explain. I'm not just being stubborn here. I'm trying to be very, very precise because it's so difficult to read the data. Data reading is a science for itself. First things first, when are you taking the measures? Are you taking the measures when the surrender vote goes through? By then, all the self-fulfilling prophecy work of these cunts has been made and laid out. They've ruined the game by now, okay? So maybe at that point, it's accurate because they wanted it to be accurate. Are you looking at the forfeit then, Or when the first time it was popped and failed. Maybe the first time it pops and fails, and it's like, oh, surrender vote 2, surrender vote 3. By surrender vote 3, these guys who didn't get the surrender vote on first try made it so that the game is lost in the first place. Okay, secondly, this is like a common thing. It's like only 3% of games that are 4-1 at 15 are won, 3.3% or something like that. That was the stat that Riot Games announced. That's also a ridiculous thing to state, because given how terrible it is, like I've experienced this in literally every single person who played League ever has as well. Let's say I'm playing in low master, I play a game, my top laner gets first blooded on Kayle, he's playing late game champ, early game weak side, dies on the Kayle and says FF because his jungle didn't camp him, and he wants to lose the game. He tries to lose the game from the minute 2. He tries to lose the game, and he wants it to be a surrender. Oh, he's into... Is that an accurate thing? It's not even close an accurate thing, because in a world where he doesn't want to get out in the game at 15 minutes, maybe that game goes entirely differently. You cannot compare the instance from a world in which surrender vote at 15 is an obvious given thing, and the culture is so fucking eroded that everyone wants to get out at 15 if it's slightly behind, compared to a world where surrender didn't exist in the first place, or where surrender was at 20 minutes. These are the long-term effects that are so pernicious that we're not really thinking about, and they're so difficult to measure and think about in the first place. I can think about it somewhat because I remember how the game was when I played it, when it was 20 minute surrender. I know what the state of the game was. That's why I can compare it in my mind, and I know how much is eroded ever since. And I'm pretty sure any person like who played back in the day can remember this. I think there's plenty of combat mechanics. I think there's just the culture problem. Then again, I'm gonna caveat this with, I don't think there's going back. I think we're fighting a lost cause. It's impossible. Like, you're fighting for yourself. The removing FF or pushing it back, I don't think it's ever gonna be given back. That's the problem of the feeding the trap game cycle. If you give it a little bit, if you give your finger, you lose a hand. The community runs with it. You created the culture. It's impossible to get out of it now. It's impossible to push back surrender vote back to 20 minutes now without community like losing its shit. They will go ape shit. They're so used to leaving the game early. The only thing you can do is like push it back and back and back and back. Maybe you can do 14 minutes, 13, 12, right? That's the only options you have now. Keep it on 15. And keeping it on 15 is like the best option you have. If you give a little bit more, it's just going to be so fucking lost. That's precisely the reason the chatter in the chat who said 3-2 should be the norm. He's an utterly wrong, and he has no idea how deep wrong he is. He's like the worst type of wrong. He thinks he's making a case, but it's not even close. 3-2 surrender vote would kill the game within 1 year. It would destroy the game. Solo queue would be unplayable within a year because of this precise reason, how the culture degrades over time.
Like, when one random guy is tilted and he spams the forfeit vote and then everybody else turns it down. I'm not talking about situations like that, but in situations...
Yeah, if somebody presses surrender and 4 people say no, I think surrender should get like instantly, like at least banned for that person, or maybe even disabled in the game at all. Like, you don't get to surrender anymore.
Situations where players forfeit the game and they get that majority to actually call the forfeit. We looked at the data for those games, and we found that players are actually very in the know about games that are losing.
I'm not buying this.
I mean, sorry, winnable versus
losing. I really want to see the full fucking research.
At the point where a game gets to the point where 4 of the 5 people want to forfeit, it is very often the case that forfeiting was...
At the point... See what he said there? Like, you gotta be very precise. It's not at the point where surrender vote was initiated the first time. At the point that surrender vote went through, that the game is so dire. Why is it dire at that point? Could it be anything with the people wanting to surrender? People wanting to become self-fulfilling prophecies? And in their all-powerful ego deciding to terminate the game for their own teammates and rendering it unplayable. And even then, like, you could make a very good argument that, like, those games aren't, like, so hopeless because people just don't understand how to play the game, and they'll never understand if they don't try and like they're let to play.
So players tend to have a good pulse on how far they are behind when they actually choose to fully forfeit a game.
Fully forfeit.
Again, assuming the majority of the people in the lobby. I
disagree with the whole premise. Even if we deleted the FF entirely, people will still behave like that to explode their nexus. Yes, but you're pushing the normal distribution to only the most egregious people. The lower the barrier is, the earlier you can ruin the game for your team. The earlier you can ruin it, the more people you encompass from the normal distribution of the toxicity. Right? If you put it like there's no surrender at all, only the very, very few absolute fucking morons ruin the games.
Counterpoint, Azzapp is cool. Oh, Azzapp is cool. And by the way, to give you the other perspective, Azzapp also, by the way, is right.
So he's talking about me when he says streamers. Yo, why did he say removing? That was not my argument. God damn.
What I mean by he's right is, technically, you should never forfeit. If you want to have the highest win rate possible,
okay, that's straight up my argument.
Never forfeit the game for any reason.
Yep.
Because
True.
every game is winnable. Literally
True.
every game is winnable.
True.
They could DC.
Yeah, or like maybe their connection is rock solid, but maybe their arteries aren't. So you're hoping for cardio arrest, so you can actually get fucking like not a lethal one, obviously. So you can actually get like enemies to give you some time and you can win the game. Like we won a game with Vi the other day with like 3 fucking inhibs down, naked Nexus, and we still won. Like it's crazy, man. Oh my god! What? We got ahead at 52 minutes in. We're playing for 52 minutes spike, guys. That's when we start scaling, you know?
Down 20,000 gold, maybe the enemy team DCs.
Yeah.
Like, actually. Right? And so if you're...
I mean, DC is a very rare scenario when you're losing. That happened to me only like a handful of times. But there's like a lot better win con. And it's just human psychology. Like, people hate having something taken from them. You would much rather not lose money than get money. Okay? You would much rather not lose something you already own than get something new. Even if that getting new something is in higher value than the original thing that you would lose. People just hate losing stuff. If you get a game and enemies get ahead 4 or 5k, there's a card this game, I remember, that we won basically by tilting him. Straight up. Win con only to tilt him. You start the game, enemies pull ahead. They're ahead 4 or 5k. Maybe they play phenomenally well. You make a slight comeback and he's no longer 5k ahead, he's ahead 3k. He breaks him mentally because he thought that the game was given. He, in his mind, decided already that the game is won. He won the LP, and he cannot cope with losing something that's already won. And he's not even going to try after that. And he's going to lose the game on purpose for his team because he thinks his team has taken the game away from him. And he doesn't want to play from a state in which he's no longer massively ahead. They don't want to play from a minorly ahead state because he thinks the game is already like deserved. It's the most classic trick in the book. Enemies are ahead, you tilt their best fucking player. He all of a sudden like goes against his own teammates, doesn't play well anymore, even though he's supposed to be the rook, the combining force that carries them. He falls apart, everything falls apart. They lose the game. All the lead is meaningless if you can tilt them. I can't stress enough how often this actually happens. It's just so easy.
Mindset is you should never forfeit because every game can be won. I don't think that's an unreasonable mindset to have because you're right. It's true. So yeah, if you don't like forfeiting, all the power to you. But I think it's also important in a game like League that we don't stick players in games that they're very likely to lose and allow them to like get out if they believe they're not going to win it. And we find that players generally have a pretty accurate perception when it comes to like...
Okay, I agree with the point like he made earlier. On this one, I disagree with the entire premise. And these two ideologies are kind of pit against one another, right? So what happens is like we love the people who don't FF and play the game. That's perfectly reasonable mindset to have. In a way, it's a better, more objectively correct way to play. To the contrary, we also don't want people to get trapped. So we push the boundary from 20 to 15. So you're just harming all the never FF potential by making so many games terminated because couple of people who really want to lose the game. Like you can't like the situation, but also just keep lowering the number. I think the surrender vote should go back to 20 minutes. 4-1 is fine. I don't mind 4-1. 4-1 is fine, but it should be beyond 20 minutes. 15 minute surrender vote is utter trash, and the game quality would go much up. Like it would improve drastically if you would just regain those 5 minutes. And the fact that players know when to surrender correctly, I entirely disagree. I don't agree with that. Here's what should happen with the surrender vote, and we made this argument like a while back. A surrender vote shouldn't be imposed. It shouldn't be imposed by the game, nor should be imposed by the player. Surrender vote should be a tick box on your tab. If you think the situation is dire, you click your thing, because it's no longer a super express thing. It's no longer prone to major emotional outbursts. Like your teammate dies mid-fight, boom, fucking surrender vote. I'm fighting a team fight, fighting for my life, and now all of a sudden there's a big green pop-up on my screen, tilting the hell out of me while I'm playing the game. That should not be a thing. And very often people are going to be like, fuck this, click it, yes. And then it's like 1 second later, they're like, why did we surrender? Like, the game's not even that bad. Prone to emotional surrender. It should be a more methodical, tactical decision that's hidden. It's on a tab. It should be there, and you tick the box. Once enough people tick it, 4 people or 5 tick it, surrender vote goes through. Fair enough. That's how you do it. And I see no argument, no reason why you shouldn't implement that, because it's far superior. Again, I disagree with the premise. I disagree that the people know. Saying that people know when a surrender vote is good, especially at the time of surrender we're going through. It's like saying we have data that dodges were good. These couple of dodges that happened, they were good. We have data. You had Nunu with Cleanse and Ghost. It's like, yeah, he was trying to bait a fucking dodge. That doesn't mean that the dodge is good. He wanted to fucking bait it, and he succeeded, okay? He wouldn't have done that if dodging wasn't an option. Same as surrendering. Like, he wouldn't be fucking running the game down to make the surrender road pliable if the game wasn't surrenderable at that time and place. So, yeah, you can't say people know when to surrender at the time of surrendering. That's just a really, really non-statement. I feel like it's their way of, like, insulating themselves, like, from any criticism. It's like, oh, we got the data. No, like, I don't trust that data one bit. I'm sorry, August. That data smells like Disco Nunu in lobby. I love August. Honestly, I wish I could talk to him about this, like, in bigger, because I'm actually curious. Like, I mean, chat is doing chat things. They're only asking, like, obviously, like, the fucking easy CNN questions or whatever. They gotta ask him some hard ones, you know? Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. I love it. What a wonderful Riot August video.